Welcome back to an early morning edition of Tragedy and Hope's Casual Cafe. I'm your host and navigator, Richard Grove, and today with me on Skype and on the phone via Skype, we've got several guests, and we're going to discuss this new foreign affairs issue published by the Council on Foreign Relations, especially the article titled "Our New Robot Overlords." And this series of articles about what really happened solving the Cold War's cold cases, Iran, Congo, Pakistan, and Chile. They're basically saying if these things hadn't been overthrown, if these places hadn't been overthrown by the CIA, those places would have been overthrown anyway. So it's basically like saying, yeah, I stole the money from the register, but somebody was going to steal that money anyway, so that's why we took it. So mixed metaphors aside, let me introduce you to this morning's crew. I'm going to start out with Kevin Cole. Kevin, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Good morning. Hello.
All right, so what state are you in today? Are you in Missouri or Illinois?
I am in the Ozarks in Missouri.
There you go. Now you're up on the screen. Okay, and so Kevin is one of our house researchers here, and Kevin and I are going to, I don't know if Kevin's read these articles. I haven't done my homework, so I'm hoping to learn through today's session. I have the magazine, and I'm familiar with the topics. I'm hoping some of the gents on this call have done some homework, and I can always depend on Kevin as one of the go-to people. The next person is this guy, Ted Wodoslawsky, who I just saw in this Reality Bites episode 1 on the McCullum memo, of which I was not familiar. And this is Ted's first venture as a Tragedy and Hope community member of making his own video series, trying to share some of the wisdom nuggets that he's learned. And let me go back to the screen here. You can see Ted. Good morning, Ted. Where are you calling from? Chicago?
Good morning. No, I'm actually, well, I live in the Detroit area, but today I'm on a business trip and I'm somewhere near Memphis, Tennessee.
Somewhere near Memphis, Tennessee. That's a great description.
Yeah.
And last but not least, from the Marietta aspect of Georgia, we've got Keith McAllister, who's also a Tragedy and Hope community member. Good morning, Keith.
How you doing, guys?
We are doing excellent. I had a little. There's always technical hitches when you're trying to get something going early in the morning, but we got it. We just 15 minutes late. We're still getting this together, and I think it's all working out so far. You sound great, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about this Iran article that I didn't read. But I am very familiar with Operation Ajax in 1953 and the overthrow of democratically elected Dr. Mohammad Mossadegh by people like Kermit Kim Roosevelt and these other these people who play something called the Great Game, which has been going on for a long time. So I'm looking forward to talking about that article with you, and then we're going to kick around some of these other articles. Did anyone read our new Robot Overlords article?
That is the article entitled by that name, or is that the New World Order article that goes into the technology?
I think that article is actually in the previous issue. I might be wrong. I don't know. But,
okay.
Maybe I'm wrong. I'm looking.
Well, so I'm reading from the July-August 2014 Foreign Affairs that had.
Well, that's the issue.
Yeah, that's the right issue. So let me look here in the table of contents, and if I have to cut something out, I will.
I think it's the article that I read in that was called New World Order, dealt with the Robot Overlords, but I didn't find that same title. It could be that I'm mistaken. But.
That's misleading, but I'm going to go to page 44 here because I think that is the article you read, Kev.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, it has a picture of Robot Overlords, so that's probably something to do with it. Yeah. Very menacing, I might add.
Yeah. Yeah, it discusses a lot of the neoliberal aspects of technocracy.
But just as an aside, I worked in the robot industry on the automation side of it, industrial automation for about 4 or 5 years, so I'm pretty familiar with robot technology. So if it helps.
Well, one of the quotes that it has here in the article is, "Machines are substituting for more types of human labor than ever before. As they replicate themselves, they are also creating more capital. This means that the real winners of the future will not be the providers of cheap labor or the owners of ordinary capital, both of whom will be increasingly squeezed by automation. Fortune instead will favor a third group, those who can innovate and create new products, services, and business models." Like autonomous drones. All right. I see that as a very cheerful picture of the future where they have machines that are basically going to replicate themselves. And, the cheap labor doesn't even matter anymore if you're starving and hungry and you need a job. They've got robots that are going to do this stuff, and the robots don't need to eat. They just need electricity, and there's plenty of that around.
Well, the interesting thing about robots in manufacturing, at least for my experience, is that really what they're up against, at least in the United States, is a shortage of due to our focusing on jobs for young people that are everybody wants to make video games, but no one actually wants to pick up a wrench and do a lot of work anymore. And so, at least in my experience, that one of the reasons for the growth in robotics, especially in one industry in welding, was you can't find people who know how to weld anymore. So there's this other aspect of kind of our societal educational processes that push people towards either one of two places. Either going to make video games or they're going to work at McDonald's. And there's not a lot of skilled labor left in the United States. And that's what's causing it. Part of it here, I'm not saying all of it, but part of it is that sort of what's happened to the country. Where have we gone since the World War II generation of people making stuff? We don't make stuff here anymore. And when we do want to make stuff, there's nobody around to make it. So that's what drives that aspect of, at least in the United States. Now, other parts of the world, like China, they're actually the largest consumer of robotics right now, and they don't have a labor problem. So there's something else going on there. From my viewpoint, anyway.
Well, and people don't need to weld because the robots weld. What do you think, Keith?
Well, it's interesting because my background actually is in repair of automated systems.
Huh. Hey, boy, how do we get to this point? That's good.
That was a loaded question, but I didn't know it was loaded.
I found the article on the internet, and I pulled it up, and I was starting to read, and I go, wait a minute, I do some of this stuff. A little bit about my background. When I got out of high school back in the mid-'70s, I went to trade school and learned to be a machinist. And at that time, I was starting to see the introduction of what would become CNC machines. And so I got an opportunity to venture off instead into an industrial maintenance aspect where I actually repair machines. And I got into that. And for the last 33 years, I've worked for a major transportation company who has brown trucks. And part of my job is I maintain about a 6 or 7 mile conveyor system that also has automated components to it. So when I saw this, I went, hey, wait a minute, I'm a bit familiar with some of this stuff. So this is kind of interesting.
You and I have very similar backgrounds. I also got out of school in the mid-'70s and began working for a company that made CNCs and program. CNC, by the way, stands for Computerized Numerical Control, and Programmable Logic Controllers is
right.
PLCs. And those are they're just basically fancy names for. They didn't want to call them computers because they might scare people. And so I've been in this automation, unfortunately, game for a long, long time.
What's really interesting, and hearing you guys talk about, especially you, Ted, talking about that there's not people out there to do stuff. It was one thing that's running in right now. I'm bumping up on retiring, and my employer is very worried because where can they get somebody that has my background in electrical, mechanical, hydraulics, pneumatics? I can weld, I can fabricate, I can do all those things. They don't teach that anymore, and there's no manufacturing base that creates guys like me.
Right. Yeah, there isn't. No, and that's maybe if we take a step back from that, was that part of the big plan, or was that eventually the idea was to get all the manufacturing out of the United States? So what's left is done by automated machines, but now there's nobody actually left to work on the automated machines anymore. So
right, that's great. In fact, we're seeing where I work at. Used to there was a lot of manual labor involved in the sortation of packages and so forth and so on. Whereas now more and more of that process is being automated. Now they still haven't figured out how to unload and load a truck with a robot. But as far as all the processes in between, more and more of that is becoming completely automated. And at one time, the cost was the big prohibitive factor of that. Well, all that cost, because of, cost of technology has come way down. All that now has almost become irrelevant in the discussion of future business models. So now everything is how do we automate? How do we change our infrastructure over from 60s and 70s technology to this new automated technology?
Yeah, and back to the point about go ahead.
Oh no, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt there. But I think you made a great point there about the technology getting to a point where it's almost describing, and what I took away from the article was very similar to what I got from Jacques Ellul's Technological Society, wherein they described that technology always moves towards ever increasing complexity that solidifies a lot of the problems. And this article goes through and presents kind of two artificial choices. And really settles on that in the future it's gonna be, there's a scarcity of ideas, and that they're gonna it's gonna take some kind of a superhero capitalist to mesh the problems of the technological society with the decrease in manual production. And they go on to applaud Apple for deciding to bring back a lot of the technology and the manufacturing into the United States. But the only way they're able to do that and keep capital down, because they're no longer choosing to exploit the Chinese labor because it's becoming an ethical quandary for them. What it's going to do is it's going to cut human beings out of it even further as they further automate these technologies into the future. And it creates kind of a larger gap between the individual manual laborer and the individual superhero capitalist, much like a Tim Ferriss or somebody that promotes, sending over and exporting lots of your daily activities of your business structure to companies overseas, where ever increasingly larger groups of people in India and China are willing to take over your customer service. You don't even have to have anybody there for that, and you can automate it all the way out. And that creates this huge wealth gap, as well as a gap in the future. They say that our kids may not have to work as much as us, but what will they be doing? So I think it raised a lot of interesting points. I don't agree with the solutions that they propose, because what it seems like they've done is they've actually created the conditions by going to China, exploiting all of this labor, and then trying to perfect their own side of it, rather than to help with the ethical quandaries. And you find a lot of these manufacturers over there who have never even seen the products that they're manufacturing in their final form. So I think it was a great pick. I don't know who brought this up, but I did get quite a bit from it, and I think it outlines the neoliberal conditions that they create, and then they provide the solutions themselves to that down the road.
Great job. Great job, Kev, because they do provide the neoliberal solutions that they want you to find down the road. And I think we're wrapping, this idea of technocracy and the smart grid and automated labor, and we're figuring out this does have something to do with the dumbing down of American students. And we're not producing a workforce that can take over running the control room at a nuclear plant. And there's a lot of nuclear plants providing electricity around this country. We got to figure out how to keep that stuff running. And if we're bringing in people from other countries, then we're going to have to put everything in Mandarin or Cantonese or something like that so they can read it. And now you can't even have the opportunity to learn what's going on there. So it's just, there are easy ways to fix this, and, teach people fact from fiction, get them to stop believing things that are not true, get them to start being autonomous and autodidactic and learning for themselves and reading the things that they're not supposed to read. Normal people aren't supposed to read foreign affairs, because this discloses the roadmap of where we're going. You're not supposed to know about that. You're not supposed to know about the new Robot Overlords or the UN conference on killer robots. Say that a couple times. The UN conference on killer robots, and then search it. It's right there. Go ahead, Ted.
I was going to interject that if you want to cut this in, there's actually a video on YouTube of a robot, typically an industrial automation robot, like I've done it with the past, but it's wired up with sensors and machine guns. And, and it is the
I don't
autonomous.
Even want to search for it.
I'll dig it out and I'll find it here. But that's one of the quandaries I find myself in sometimes is, from a personal point of view, is, am I part of a problem here, or am I part of keeping America limping along by providing technology at least keeps the lights on? Because there's so many people, I've talked to young people at local colleges who don't want to do this kind of work. There's not many people out there who want to learn to be an expert welder, and it takes a lot of skill to be a welder, or learn to be it takes a very fine hand, and nobody wants to learn to polish metal anymore. They don't want to learn to cut metal. I mean, it's this. We've created a dumbed down society, and I say that with a level of sympathy, but also a society that's pervasively lazy, that doesn't really want to get up off their butts and and do anything. And it's this idea of a society of people where there are less and less people who are actually, to your point, who read foreign affairs, actually think and make decisions. They have another level of people who actually are involved in developing themselves and have a skill set that is non-exportable. And I try to tell the young people as well. Find something to do that they can't send out of the country. You really can't send welding a bridge together to China. You're going to have to we need people here to do that. There's certain skills that you need to have here, but there's so few people willing to do it. It's astonishing how few people there are to want to do it.
There are skills that you need to have here if you don't have autonomous drones building those bridges. Because the plans are they're going to have swarms of these drones just out there, like little spiders knitting together the bridges, knitting together the buildings. And that takes away the risk for the insurance companies of having human beings all the way up there on top of some 2,000-foot building. You know what I'm saying? So like their plans for the future are very much different than anything that we would plan for ourselves as individuals. And you have to ask the questions is like, why do these people see fit to spend the tax dollars that they extort from us with the threat of, incarceration or deadly force? Why do they see fit to use our tax dollars in such a way that they're creating a panopticon in a variety of ways? And what I mean by that is, there's this description of the panopticon by Jeremy Bentham, who worked for the British East India Company. And he said it's basically a perfect prison as designed by someone who wants to keep people prisoner. And it's more of a metaphor because they didn't really build this in literal fashion. But what you see today with the NSA spying and all this types of mass dragnet surveillance going on, they're collecting that data and making people aware that they're collecting the data to put people in fear. And the purpose of collecting that data is to feed it through artificial intelligence algorithms, which then are fed as the brain source for the autonomous drones to go around and use facial recognition and be autonomous. Meaning, if the drone is programmed such that it thinks you're a terrorist, it's going to hit you with a missile. And if people don't think this is going to happen in this country, look at what's going on the other side of the world. Are those people any less human than us just because they live on the other side of the world or other sides of imaginary lines and this sort of thing? So in order to, for the American public to be funding such systematized warfare for the past century, this money is always going towards new projects. They have to have an enemy. They have to dehumanize some population on the other side of the planet, usually, in order to get people to say, yes, let's go and bomb them and use all our super weapons and make them submit. I mean, it's not a very civilized way of thinking in the 21st century that we're bringing with us. And now they want to create something that's going to be completely outside of the realm of accountability or courts. Like, there's an Onion video where there's a court trial for a drone.
All right, let's go now to the case the whole nation is watching, the military trial of MQ-1 military drone TR-425.
These atrocities were the work of one drone acting alone. Now, evidence shows that there wasn't a single U.S. soldier within 100 miles of the targeted area when the bombing occurred. We're all as shocked as anyone that the drone would break protocol like this.
So far, military prosecutors have turned over significant evidence of the drone's history of violent behavior, and military psychiatrists have testified that the TR-425 has a personality disorder.
And it's like this drone dropped a bomb and killed innocent people, and it's on trial, and they're making light of it, but they're also making you aware of the fact that there's going to be no accountability in a fully automated society. There's also not a need for labor. So what's going to happen to people, even if you have skills, because now you're competing against the robots, and establishment wants the robots to be doing these things. That's why they make iRobot and all these other movies to predictively program the public to just take this and see it as normal when it happens. And there's, and not Mission Impossible, the other one with Tom Cruise, about the pre-crime film where he's walking through
Minority
Report, right? It's like Mission Impossible. It's like that short little title, Minority Report, where he's walking through the gap and he's got the other guy's eyes and it's advertising to the wrong person. And you're realizing that that's the level of advertising and connectivity and marketing that they want to get to, where you're just wired in and you can't go anywhere anonymously. And they're always marketing to you based on this aggregation of metadata that people are like, what do they use the metadata for? Well, General Mike Hayden of the NSA said they use the metadata to kill people. That's how they decide on who to kill. And that's what's going to be fed into these autonomous drones and the robot overlords. So, in observing that article, one has to ask the question, why is that a cover story on Foreign Affairs published by the Council on Foreign Relations, created out of the last will and testament of Cecil John Rhodes? What is the purpose? What is going on? Is it American? Is it about individual freedom and self-reliance and self-confidence and self-esteem? Or is it about getting the American population to be broken and submit to the will of an empire that is ongoing?
Well, let me throw something out here. Let me ask this question. I understand the dangers of technology, and there is that. But what if, for instance, there was a measure of freedom in technology? Let me go back to what Kevin said earlier, because while he was talking, the first thing I thought about was, wow, if they do away with the need for employees and we've built up a purely consumer-based economy, then what will drive the consumer-based economy? If the people don't have the economic means to go out and buy all these products that they're creating, the economy literally implode upon itself. So the next question is, how will the economy itself? The economy obviously will have to change. If you don't have all these consumers out there that have the capacity to buy, it will have to change. Now, taking technology that next step, Kevin Carson, who is an analyst over at the Center for Stateless Society, wrote a book several years ago called The Homebrew Industrial Revolution. And it's open source. You can look at it online. You can read it online. He makes the argument, and I think he makes a good argument, that because technology costs have come way down, that people literally now, instead of used to where you had to have all this capital to start up these businesses, now this technology has come down in cost. It doesn't take a great deal of capital, and a guy can buy a 3D printer, and start making guns or just whatever, right in his own basement. You can buy a small CNC machine. You can start manufacturing stuff. This thing is wide open now. Their technology can turn around and in essence be used against them. All we've got to do is start thinking about as a community, how do we take this technology? How do we create a community? How do we create a community economy? How do we help provide for ourselves? Talk about skills, these kind of things. So that's where I'm kind of thinking at.
Well, that's an astute observation, and I would connect Kevin Carson and his homebrew idea to the Homebrew Computer Club and this guy today named Richard Stallman, who's a big advocate of open source, free software. Free not meaning cost, free meaning you maintain your freedom and you're not signing some agreement and giving away your rights and proprietary this and that. Basically, Stallman's perspective is that any software that's out there should be an asset, not a liability. And what we find in today's data collection culture is that all these agreements to iTunes or whatever else you got out there software-wise, that's giving away your rights. They're stealing your data. I mean, Google's a company. You are the product, and that's what they sell. They advertise. They take your data, and that's their whole thing. They get it through the search function. It's brilliant. Right? Facebook, it's about selling you. You are the product on Facebook. So when you understand the revenue models behind all of these things, and I saw it when I was working in the software industry, and you go into these companies and it's like, well, what do you guys actually do? Oh, well, we're selling everything to DoubleClick, which back then was one of these data content, advertising, connectivity, marketing machines that takes what you do and lines you up with products that you might want to buy and this sort of stuff. And it's just taken off. And then the NSA, which was probably behind it in the first place, said, oh, well, we would find this very useful to also have this information to run our algorithms against, right? So they make the public think, well, this is just all part of corporations doing their business, and this is why you have to sign these agreements, when at the end of the day, those corporations got funded through agencies like InQtel, INQTEL. And if you look it up, it's a CIA financing arm of the CIA for specifically software and hardware projects and technology. So they know that they need cutting edge technology. They have to go to these companies in the first place and order that stuff and have it before it's ever available to the public. So this is really where the technology around us comes from. It comes from the intelligence community needing certain projects and products, created. And then as a way to capture revenue on that on the outside after it's been created, they sell it to the public. This is the same thing with Oracle. It started out as a DIA and Pentagon project. And now it's a publicly traded corporate company, and its owner is one of the richest men in the world, but no one knows who his dad is. So there are all these things going on in technology. So there's a light side and a dark side. We can only use it for the light side when we understand what we're using or how we're being used by that technology in Stallman's terms. And then that liberates us. That truth is the connection to freedom that we need, because you can't have freedom if you're not connected to truth. So it's by asking questions and observing what's going on. Like, this is just one article in this foreign affairs issue. We're going to get into the next article on Iran in a minute. But the point is, there's a lot going on that we're not being told. And if you just simply took it at face value, well, you'd think everything's fine because foreign affairs is telling you there's no problems here. It's a good thing to have these robots, and it's a good thing that we overthrew these countries, and not we, that the American government, of whom my parents and grandparents and great-grandparents paid taxes to, did these things. So, do you guys have any other comments on the technology, the smart grid, technocracy, robot overlords, or anything like that before we move into the political articles?
I just have one question. We know that the vast majority of the population doesn't read foreign affairs, right? So who is this actually written for, do you think? Or is this part of the revelation of the method? It's in print now, so you can't say that we didn't warn you. I mean, I've read foreign affairs on and on. That's what it is, right? Because if I whip this thing out in front of anybody, they're going to go, "What the hell are you reading there?" I mean, it's if I try to explain it to them,
if somebody saw me reading foreign affairs and they said, "What are you reading? Well, what are you reading for?" No one's ever asked me what I was reading for. No, it's a Bill Hicks joke. I was killing it there. Yeah. The idea is, the people who run the world are following a plan. That plan is laid down by the last will and testament of Cecil John Rhodes, and the people who were acolytes of Cecil Rhodes' last will and testament created the Council on Foreign Relations, which has this publication since 1924, I believe, and it comes out quarterly. And I have a collection behind me of ones back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 90s, different issues and articles. They can tell you in 1998 all about Osama bin Laden and his license to kill and catastrophic terrorism and the need for a new Pearl Harbor. Writers are kind of putting this together in 1998 in Foreign Affairs before PNAC ever published their document, the Project for a New American Century, about restructuring America and the call for a new Pearl Harbor. So really what you can get from reading Foreign Affairs is it's like a wave chart, and you're watching for tidal waves, and the tidal waves are going to be laid out in a wave chart in here. You use a surfing metaphor from hanging out with Weisbecker for the past couple weeks. So the idea is you can learn what's going to be done, what they're establishing and saying this is good ahead of time. It's their preferences for the members of the Council on Foreign Relations, Bilderberg Group, Trilateral Commission, all those types of people read a publication like this. In other words, the superclass, the non-elected rulers, the New World Order, the World Federalists, whatever name you want to put on them, that's the type of stuff that they are reading to get their cues on what to support and what to be against and what books to read, this sort of stuff. So it's like their playbook. So if their playbook's available, and this playbook is, I think this subscription was provided by Christopher Payne, who's been a listener and participant since like 2006 in the Tragedy and Hope community. So this is how I got it. I didn't pay Foreign Affairs. Someone thought, hey, wouldn't it be good for shits and giggles if Rich had a copy of Foreign Affairs every quarter to read? And, so I'm very much appreciative. And Ted also has his own subscription, which he shares usually in the chat box, which is how this whole conversation, came about. We were in the Tragedy and Hope community chat box. Ted was posting the links to the latest Foreign Affairs. They were discussing some of the articles. People were calling bullshit. And I said, Ted, Keith, Kevin, let's get on a call and actually do this in a media format that is shareable with other people, because otherwise it's just lost. And the four of us just had that experience that was really cool, instead of sharing it with potential of hundreds or thousands of people who might be interested in an obscure little show like the Tragedy and Hope Casual Cafe, made exclusively for advanced access members, the people who really support our ability to do what we do and continue to grow and raise our production value, which, if you've been watching lately, we've been doing just a little bit at a time. So as we continue to persist, despite the resistance, that we find that there are improvements and that learning takes place, and that when that happens, miraculous things that you never planned for in a good way do take place, such as this little call right here. So I'm going to let you guys, does anyone have any more comments on the Robot Overlords before we move into this, these atrocious articles rewriting the Cold War?
Yeah, I've got a couple more points. I've been taking notes. You guys have been making excellent points on this article, and they're so brazen to call it the New World Order. That's the title of the article.
Yeah,
I think that. And that I have books back from the early 1900s, 1920s, where they did the same thing, leading up to the League of Nations, which they saw as a technology. And if you look into Cecil Rhodes' idol, J.R. Seeley, he says that the best way for the greater expansion of Great Britain is to sow technologies. Then they had the Rhodes scholars coming across on the best boats to go to their colleges at Oxford and Cambridge, and then when planes came along, they had the Rhodes scholars coming, and they're using this as a globalization technology. To touch on what Rich said about why they're putting this article out there, I think it's very much to steer the conversation, and in many ways they steer the ship of state. You can to a T. You can read some of these articles and then turn on the TV to MSNBC, CNN, and you can hear these talking points reiterated, and then you can hear their talking points reiterated on the Daily Show, where maybe they'll have the article of the author of the article come on there and talk about technology in a kind of a wishy-washy way to try to get somebody interested in it, but they're overall controlling the conversation. And specifically, just to kind of close up my thoughts on this article, they admit in there, by their own standards, they basically say that here's the deal: education sucks in America, therefore innovation is down, and it's not going to change. And they basically say, without mentioning, they say the Bucky versus Malthus argument that technology can fix the problems is not 100% correct, and it only fixes certain areas. So it's for increased capital that they're doing this, and they say that in the future that people with ideas will be the ones that are scarce. So they say it's going to be a design and innovation future, and it's going to be entrepreneurial, but it's going to be scarce. There's going to be scarce resources of individuals who are going to stand up and have the ideas. So it's going to be a race to try to grab these networks out of the college environments where they're starting up a lot of these things. They use Instagram as an example, and they're going to try to grab those networks and use them for higher purposes of expansion overseas. I think another point that this article makes, or a way to distill this for the average individual who doesn't have Foreign Affairs magazine, would be to have them look at databases and how we're kind of born into a certain kind of normalcy along the timeline of your own life, and the acquiescence to certain technologies without thinking. And you can't go to a grocery store without them giving trying to push a card on you that you can go through all the aisles and pick out what you want, and then it creates a database, and they say, well, you use this card and it'll save you money and you're a member. Well, the benefit's not for you, and this article says the same thing. The benefit's not for you. It's not for us. It's not for the individual. It's not for the quote unquote lower classes or the middle classes. That won't exist anymore. So you can stand up and say, we won't use these databases, and they say to you, oh, we'll never use your phone number against you. We'll never give that information out to anybody else. I mean, honestly, I can't even. Yesterday, I was going somewhere to get a haircut where I wouldn't normally go, and they about wouldn't take me unless I gave them my name and my phone number and a way to to sit down and be called, and so they could see when I got my haircut last and the last date. And I'm like, that's not necessary. You used to be able to just walk into a barbershop and say, give me a number 2 on the side, and I'll be good. But no, they want to, they make it a normalcy. And the girl behind the counter, I was trying to explain to her my thoughts on it. And, she's looking at me like I'm the paranoid. And I'm telling her, there are, while this may be a small example, I'm just trying to get my hair cut. Yeah, I can give you a fake name and we could have a superficial conversation, or I can tell you, hey, I don't like to put my name in these databases. I respect my own privacy and my integrity. And unless you can produce a privacy statement for me to look at, I don't see any reason why I need to do that. And it's the same thing with, I have an iPhone, but reading this article, it's a business model that I don't want to support any longer. So, and that's not just known from this article. That's been known. They have suicide, nets out of the windows of a lot of these manufacturing plants. So so what they get us to do is to externalize our ethical decisions to somebody else that is actually the capitalist or the entrepreneurial spirit that we're not getting to benefit from. We're getting the technological benefit, but they're getting, massive capital and reward, and then that gives them influence. And the article says that this will be a problem for democracy in the future, because as economic models change, so does the political.
Very well said. I'm really glad you made that comment and shared that with the audience, just so people can perceive. It's like you're going through your daily routine and there's all these places that want to collect this information. Oh, we'll offer you this little superficial discount if we could just collect all this. Well, it's a business. Do you think they're going to take a loss on that? Or do you think they're going to get this thing and sell it for more money? That's what they do. So, that's where you have to be careful who you do business with.
And even on a final point, now, one of the big emergences in the past, I would say 2 years, is this concept of big data, right? Or storage has become so cheap. They have so much data. They're awash in information. And now there's this new discipline called a data scientist. And that job is to basically plow through everything that's been given to them and even further enslave us, for lack of a better way of saying it, because really you are. I mean, if you're being pointed, when you go on a website or anything down a certain path to choose a certain product, you are in fact a slave, and it's becoming more frightening because I'm actually still involved in technology and I see this stuff, and as I sit in a room and people are applauding like idiots, I'm sitting in an abject horror. They have no idea of really what they're applauding for. Maybe they do, and they don't care. But anyway, that's my final comment on that as well.
All right, and with that, we're going to move to page 2. They couldn't wait to give you this article on Foreign Affairs. What really happened in Iran? The CIA, the ouster of Mossadegh, and the restoration of the Shah. The ouster of Mossadegh.
I don't mean to laugh.
That's an interesting turn of phrase there. Ray Takeyh, Takeyh, is the author of this article on page 2. Let me just read from the first couple paragraphs of this to set a little context for our conversation. And I want everyone to keep in mind that the Anglo-Persian Oil Company, or the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, is British Petroleum. It's BP. That's my note for this this section here. By the way, I made my note while Ted was talking at the beginning of this. This is how you have to do it. You go to class, you don't do your homework, you read while the teacher's talking, and you pay attention. So I was able to highlight some fascinating comments out of this article, and it starts with, back in 2009, during this heavily promoted Cairo speech on American relations with the Muslim world, United States President Barack Obama noted in passing that, quote, in the middle of the Cold War, the United States played a role in the overthrow of a democratically elected Iranian government, end quote. Obama was referring to the 1953 coup that toppled Iranian Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh and consolidated the rule of the Shah, Mohammad Pahlavi. Obama would go on to remind his audience that Iran had also committed its share of misdeeds against the Americans, but he clearly intended his allusion to Washington's role in the coup as a concession, a public acknowledgement that the United States shared some of the blame for its long-simmering conflict with the Islamic Republic. Yet there was a supreme irony to Obama's concession. The history of the U.S. role in the Iran's 1953 coup may be well known, as the president declared in his speech, but it is not well founded. On the contrary, it rests on two... I can't even read it without laughing. On the contrary, it rests heavily on two related myths: that the machinations by the CIA were the most important factor in Mossadegh's downfall, and that Iran's brief democratic interlude was spoiled primarily by American and British meddling. For decades, historians, journalists, and pundits have promoted these myths, injecting them not just into the political discourse, but also into popular culture. Most recently, Argo, a Hollywood thriller that won the 2013 Academy Award for Best Picture, suggested that Iran's 1979 Islamic Revolution was a belated response to an injustice perpetrated by the United States a quarter century earlier. That version of events has also been promoted by Iran's theocratic leaders, who have exploited it to stroke anti-Americanism and to obscure the fact that the clergy itself played a major role in toppling Mossadegh. In reality, the CIA's impact on the events of 1953 was ultimately insignificant. Let me read that again. This is a reading from page 2 of Foreign Affairs, What Really Happened in Iran. It says, quote, in reality, the CIA's impact on the events of 1953 was ultimately insignificant. Regardless of anything the United States did or did not do, Mossadegh was bound to fall, and the Shah was bound to retain his throne and expand his power. Yet, the narrative of American culpability has become so entrenched that it now shapes how many Americans understand the history of U.S.-Iranian relations and influences how American leaders think about Iran. Now, I can't say I'm not a big, I can't tolerate bullshit, so I'm not going to continue reading that too much further. But what I did want to share was this little article from a place called the National Security Archive. And the document is the CIA confirms role in 1953 Iran coup. Documents provide new details on Mohammad Mossadegh overthrow and its aftermath. This is National Security Archive electronic briefing number 435, posted August 19th, 2013. And it goes on to read. So it's Washington, D.C., August 19th, 2013. Marking the 60th anniversary of the overthrow of Iranian Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh, the National Security Archive is today posting recently declassified CIA documents on the United States' role in the controversial operation. American and British involvement in Mossadegh's ouster has long been public knowledge, but today's posting includes what is believed to be the CIA's first formal acknowledgement that the agency helped to plan and execute the coup. Now, if we just look at this one instance, we might say, I don't know what's going on there. Maybe we didn't have a role in the coup. But when you study the CIA overall and its history of coups, because this is something they perfected well before the assassination of John F. Kennedy, you see a pattern emerge where the American intelligence agencies are taking what it's learned from the British intelligence agencies and now practicing what it's learned in Iran and Congo and Pakistan and Chile. And these are some of the stories that we're going to get to. So having introduced the Iran 1953, both the National Security Archive, where here's the documents and they did it, and today's revisionist history, where the foreign affairs author is basically telling the future, hey, we don't have to admit that anymore. We can make it really murky and just be like, I don't know what happened back then. I don't know what Kermit Roosevelt and, Kim Philbin and these other guys were doing back there. So I'm going to open it up to the roundtable for discussion, having provided just that bit of context. Go ahead, Ted.
I also had a hard time not laughing out loud. Actually, I did laugh out loud when I read this article. It's almost like this is a Mad Magazine we're reading here of Spy versus Spy or something. Because,
I thought it was The Onion.
Honestly, it's that I can't imagine the people who wrote this and in the foreign affairs editors not sitting around reading parts out loud and laughing and falling out of chairs at what they're saying here, because as you said, it's the CIA's own documents, confirm what we people have known or suspected for a long time, that they were the major player in this entire in the coup. In his ousting and really the problems we've had ever since then. So I find it astonishing that something like this is actually in print. Not surprising, but astonishing. It's mind-boggling, actually. I'm actually for a loss for words. So maybe someone else could chime in with some more history on this thing.
Yeah, I think it was really par for the course. This guy's a senior fellow of the Council on Foreign Relations out of Georgetown University. He was a State Department official and an aide to Dennis Ross in the Obama administration, according to the bio online, and very much involved in making decisions for this country in the past. So then he goes to the private sector and he writes an article that's favorable to their foreign policy positions. Now, because I focused more on the article on Chile, and I want to hear more about what you guys have to say on this specific article. I wanted to mention something I caught last night. Actually, I caught it on TiVo because I saw that Hillary Clinton, the next oligarch, was on the Daily Show last night, and if you listen to her long enough, she can't help but spew Council on Foreign Relations talking points. I mean, she said in the past, want to thank Richard Haas and da because they've moved a new office of the CFR to DC just down the road from the State Department, so we know where to go to get our cues on what to do. That's not an exact quote; it's actually worse what she says, but. What she says that needs to be done in the future, and what I think these articles, I imagine she's reading these articles and she's creating a larger theme in which to move forward, because she already has the body politic of the CFR behind her. But she says this: we need to tell a better story. and we have to believe it. And that's essentially what she said, is that we need to tell the younger generations what we did in World War II and what we did using the we. I wasn't alive, but somebody did that before us, and we need to create this better narrative, because she said that's what's actually failing around the world, is that we're not telling a good enough story. It doesn't matter whether or not it's true or not, because what I'm finding with a lot of the research that I'm doing into organic unity and into the elements of education is that it turns out that the history of authority is always written by the authors of history. So what they can do is just front load this material on changing the narrative, and then eventually depending on where the power structure falls, that will become the narrative. So I found it very disturbing. I think there's a lot that can be. I found it very strange that they put all these articles back to back to back, because it's an apology, like apologist version of history that doesn't ring true with the actual facts, because there are many documentaries that go into the overthrow of Mohammad Mossadegh and the involvement in the United States. But if you're going to develop future relations with Iran, as Mr. Takei is pushing, because he's one of these guys that doesn't think that they're trying to go bomb the world with nuclear weapons. He believes that they're wanting access to the global marketplace. So in order to make them feel better, you can change the narrative and say, oh well, we weren't involved in that, and we can find common ground on what we can do with it today. So I found that very strange. I'd like to pass it on to somebody else.
Well, to your point of all these articles being in a single magazine, someone posted online that image that's on the cover of Foreign Affairs is actually from a movie called Anatomy of a Murder. So I think that there's something also going on with that as well. It's almost you're putting everything out there at once, and also even the subtitle, Solving the World's Cold Cases. I mean, I didn't know these cases were cold. Cold case means you never really knew what happened. So I think the whole thing coming out at one time in an apologist revisionist fashion is significant. I mean, it's almost it's all in one handy place now. All your denials are in one handy book you can carry with you wherever you go, whether that's for Hillary or anybody else. It's a fascinating tactic that they used here.
Yeah, so it's the white man's burden if it worked out well for him, and if not, that's not what we meant to do, and we didn't do it.
Hey, let me jump in here just a second, because I guess I'm the schmuck that read the article. Yeah, I mean, revisionist history, all the way down, no doubt about it. I don't know if you guys actually went to the comment section and read the comments. I mean, this guy got hammered in the comment section. I mean, it was entertaining to read it nonetheless. But as I went through the article and I read it, it sounded like the guy was basically saying, regardless of anything else that took place, all these events were, on some level, were going to happen anyway. Mossadegh was going to fall, and he makes the argument. But I think in making his argument, he leaves out so much, because, as you go through and you read the history of Kermit Roosevelt going over there, and, he went over there and he spent several $1 million stirring up what ultimately became the revolution that overthrew Mossadegh. But then you go back and say, okay, wait a minute, who is Kermit Roosevelt? Kermit Roosevelt himself had connections to the CFR. In 1948, he wrote a pamphlet calling for the partition, or on the partition of the Palestinian state. Roosevelt was actually very, very sympathetic to the Arab cause. And in 1951, this is to me where it really gets interesting. In 1951, he became a member of an organization called American Friends of the Middle East. And amongst that organization's members was Dorothy Thompson, who many claim was probably the second most influential woman in America behind Eleanor Roosevelt. And Dorothy Thompson early on was herself pro to the Zionist cause. In 1925, she was over in Berlin as head of a bureau, and I can't remember the publication. And then in the early 30s, because of her articles against the Hitler and the Nazi cause, they finally kick her out. But at this point, she's still pro-Zionist. Also, other members of the American Friends of the Middle East was a woman by the name of Virginia Gildersleeve. Now, Gildersleeve, she was the only female to the American delegation that founded the United Nations. But Gildersleeve was pro-Arab. And then, of course, Roosevelt himself was pro-Arab. But at some point, I was reading another article at George Washington University at the Eleanor Roosevelt Project, and on that article on Dorothy Thompson, at some point she became pro-Arab to the Arab cause and put aside whatever her Zionism was. But getting right back to the American Friends of the Middle East organization, historian Robert Moats Miller, in his book, Harry Emerson Fosdick, Preacher, Pastor, and Prophet, made note that the American Friends of the Middle East was funded by both the Central Intelligence Agency and Aramco, which is the Saudi Arabia oil interest. Now, my question when I saw that was, okay, here is Iran. They now have broken ties from British control of their oil. They basically control their own destiny. So now did the CIA along with Aramco came in, and were they trying to re-corral the Iranian oil so certain vested interests could keep control of the global oil market, even back then?
Another point along those lines is it actually says in the article, and I actually did also read the article, by the way, on page 4, the United Kingdom, a declining empire struggling to adjust to its diminishing influence, saw the Anglo-Iranian oil company as a crucial source of energy and profit, as well as a symbol of what little imperial prestige the country had managed to cling to through the end of World War II. So London responded to the nationalization of the oil industry with fury. And I think that the fury, the ultimate play out of that, of course, they embargoed all the oil. It caused an economic collapse. And sure, Mossadegh probably would have got ousted if his economy had collapsed anyway. But let's face it, your economy is not really going to collapse if you have the ability to export your greatest natural resource, in this case, oil. So to say that, he would have been ousted anyway, well, sure. If a meteor had hit the Iranian oil fields and obliterated them, the economy probably would have collapsed. But I mean, it's this idea that, as you said, the narrative of this would have happened anyway. Well, yeah, I'd find that to be another very telling sign that London's fury, and of course, we became their what's the right word? Their executioner to a certain extent after World War II. So I thought that was very telling.
I think that I don't know. That may be a stretch on some level to say that it would have fallen anyway. I'm kind of agreeing with what you're saying, but the way I look at it was that's almost irrelevant to a certain extent because of the fact that we know the history that we did go over there and meddle. We did go over there and basically foster that revolt to take place that ousted Mossadegh. Another point that he makes in the article that to me that was just a hoot was I don't know what page this because I've got a printout on it, but in the article it says on July 11th Eisenhower approved the plan, talking about Operation Ajax, and the CIA and MI6 went to work. The Western intelligence agencies certainly found fertile ground for their machinations, as the turmoil sweeping Iran had already seriously compromised Mossadegh's standing. It appeared that all that was left to do was for the Shah to officially dismiss the prime minister. Well, then later on in the article, then he says this, and again, just talking about Eisenhower. Contrary to Roosevelt's account, talking about Kermit Roosevelt, the documentary record reveals that the Eisenhower administration was hardly in control, was in fact surprised by the way events played out. He just contradicted himself because here he says that Eisenhower approved the plans, but then he turns around and then Eisenhower is surprised at the outcome.
So he approved the plan, but he's surprised it worked. Is that basically is that a summary of what they're saying? I mean, that's ridiculous. Yeah.
I'm approving this plan. Oh my God, it worked.
Yeah. Who knew? My God, we should do this more often.
Well, that was one of their first, like, so after they set up the special relationship and they codify it during World War II, and now after World War II, the Americans and the British are working together in Operation Gladio, and Operation Gladio is the umbrella group between the Anglo-American intelligence establishment, under which there's a transfer of the British Commonwealth, which is the empire, that's the rebranding of that, to America. This is all part of the last will and testament of Cecil John Rhodes, and Kevin can add the context of what I'm about to say. So they have this plan. They have Operation Gladio, and it's the British training the terrorists and the Americans funding it, and this goes on for 40 or 50 years, and then they transition it to Operation Gladio B, where they take the Arab Nazis that St. John Philby, Kim Philby had sold to Alan Dulles, and they put that to work. That's the Muslim Brotherhood, that's the Al-Qaeda, that's Mujahideen, that's ISIS today. These are all the same things connected through history. So what we're seeing in the news today between Israel and Palestine, or ISIS in Iraq, or ISIS in Iran, or wherever, like, there's a train of causality in financing and covert operations that's all available for people to realize, but they're not going to tell you on MSNBC or CNN or any of those channels, because those channels are funded by the same people with the same agendas of that which we're trying to discover herein. So,
Richard,
yeah, go ahead.
Richard, I'm glad you brought up Gladio, because there's a section in this article under its title, Under True Colors. It says this: in 1952, the conflict had brought Iran's economy to the verge of collapse. Tehran had failed in many ways to get its oil around the British embargo, and deprived of its key sources of revenue, was facing mounting budget deficits and having difficulty meeting its payroll. Washington began to fear that the standoff with the British, Mossadegh, had allowed the economy to deteriorate so badly that his continued rule would pave the way for today Iran's Communist Party to challenge him to take power. So there was an aspect of this, of a Cold War threat. And something else that I researched and found out that the Russians, towards the end of World War II, had established a footprint in northern Iran, in northern Iran, and it was post World War II. The United Nations, they finally told the Russians, hey, you guys have to leave. Was this Russia trying to take control of Iranian oil, or was the Russians just trying to basically corral what was then? They had total control of the Caspian Basin.
Yeah. So the use of things like the Mujahideen, when Zbigniew Brzezinski is hiring what became Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden back in 1979 under Jimmy Carter, they're using that to defeat Russia in Afghanistan so that America can move into Afghanistan eventually and take over, because the British have been at war in Afghanistan for hundreds of years. They had several wars in Afghanistan. So when you count in the British East India Company, the history of opium smuggling, and Afghanistan's role in producing poppies, then you start to get the geopolitical machinations of that, the past 200 years all start to come in context. There's also a history of using Operation Gladio to facilitate black markets and drug smuggling, and the CIA and MI6 are using other groups as proxies to do that dirty work. And that's what's fleshed out, not in conspiracy theories, by reading the actual history of the Mujahideen and the origins of Al-Qaeda, and the connections with Zbigniew Brzezinski, the Cold War, the Soviet War in Afghanistan, and especially Operation Gladio, which puts the Arab Nazis that were recruited by British intelligence and Kim Philby and sold to American intelligence and Alan Dulles, and then they were kept on the back burner for a couple years and used around the world to shift some things and cause tension. But that's become the main focus. So instead of it being the Soviets versus America, and we have to put up this line and protect against Soviet invasion, the excuse for Operation Gladio, it's now we have to fight this global war on terror because there's these extremist Arabs that are out there causing trouble. But this is all, when you follow the money, you know that they're concocting something that is a myth and not a fact. It's not based on facts. This is what they want the public to believe, so the public will say, you have to protect us from them. Here's a bunch of money. Go to war for, the first, 15 years of the 21st century, because they're not going to stop anytime soon. So these are just, these are all overlapping perceptions, but you can't take them as singular. You take them singular at first, but then you add them up to what else do you know? And there's we would have to unlearn too much, at least as this group on this call, to buy into any of this BS that they're putting forth in this foreign affairs issue.
Let me also interject this. I think to help understand Operation Ajax, if you go out online, go out onto YouTube. If you go out and type in PBS success or Guatemala, and you go out and look at some of the videos, there's a video, I wish I could remember the name of it, but they actually interview E. Howard Hunt on what he did in Guatemala in 1954 in regards to the overthrow of our bins. And when you hear him talk about what they did, and you hear about all the other people that are interviewed, and they talk about Bernays and all this other stuff, you see the pattern. I mean, when I read this article, the first thing that came to my mind, I said, this guy is he a moron? Is he an idiot that's never seen how the CIA operate? This is a classic case of how they operate. And to me, PB success, which has been very talked about, even by the players themselves, E. Howard Hunt being one of them, when you see that, when you hear them talk about it, it's you just go back to 1 year earlier in Operation Ajax, and you go, oh yeah, it makes perfect sense. But he's trying to sell us. This guy's selling revisionist history is the only thing I can come to.
I think another thing, which you quoted from the article, I'm going to reread here. Mossadegh had allowed the economy to deteriorate so badly. They're blaming the victim is another way of saying that. It's like, well, he allowed the economy to deteriorate. I mean, because they blockaded the oil. I find that to be just another statement that's blaming Mossadegh for his own ouster. That's the right word to use. I mean, I thought that was another really bizarre statement.
They're blaming the store for having too much cash in the cash register.
Yeah,
that's what they're saying. Yeah. That store had too much cash in the cash register. Somebody was going to rip it off, so American and British intelligence did it because it was bound to happen. You didn't want the Soviets to get that money, right?
Yeah, they're bad. We're good. So better we rob them than the Soviets.
It's a dumb portrayal of good and evil.
Yeah, well, it really is.
Here's another contradiction. Talking about your point about Mossadegh and the economy. Earlier in the same article, he writes the following: in the years following World War II, Iran was a devastated country, recovering from famine and poverty brought on by the war. Does that not play into it? Do all of a sudden the events of the war just, that doesn't matter anymore? Mossadegh, it's kind of like, now, the economy goes bad and it gets worse under Obama, and people will go, see what Obama did, but they completely ignore whatever happened under Bush and what may have added to the problem that we have it today.
I think that what we're seeing is a result of a whole bunch of individuals believing things that are not true, putting themselves into groups based on those untruths. And then you have the juxtaposition of what they're trying to get away with today versus reality. And Kevin, I wanted you to jump in about the connectivity of the Last Will and Testament of Cecil Rhodes and the Rhodes Scholars to everything that we've been talking about, because underneath of organic unity is where you find the special relationship and all these little sub-coups and all the things that they're talking about in the foreign affairs. But I was looking for a macrocosmic tie it together kind of perspective that I thought maybe you could bring to the table.
Yeah, as far as the history of how these groups came about, with Cecil Rhodes' Last Will and Testament, he said he wanted a merger of the English-speaking people, and he enlisted the people that he thought would fulfill his legacy in the way closest to his will, therefore fulfilling the organic unity of Cecil Rhodes' Last Will and Testament, because it creates all of these separate entities. They then go off and spin their own webs, which is the basis of domination. Going back to Charlemagne, Alexander the Great, whoever you want to put in there, is that you create as many overlapping entities, and now it really comes down to NGOs. They use a lot of these non-governmental organizations to do the dirty work of the corporations, because they learned in the past. This is an old model they're discussing here, and they're trying to clean up. Basically, is what it amounts to, because what was mentioned there by Keith is that the nationalization is used as a supposed crisis. So when these countries finally get wind of what's happening to their resources, and they elect democratically elected leaders in order to nationalize or take control of the resources that these foreign countries are exploiting, that becomes the problem for the corporations. And this article, as well as the one on Chile, outlines this well, because it doesn't mention the fact that in Chile there was copper ore and PepsiCo and all these other companies that had vested interest if Allende was to nationalize certain labor industries. So with relation to what you asked, though, with Rhodes' Last Will and Testament, they first create the Commonwealth Journal of International Affairs, which is the precursor to the Council on Foreign Relations, the Royal Institute, the International Pacific Institute, as well as the Australian International Affairs Group, and one in Toronto as well. So by creating these interdependent bodies all over the world, and then seeding the foreign policy thought with the body politic, because the people, how you get into power, unless you're, how you get invited into the CFR, unless you're a celebrity or somebody that they want to use as a spokesperson overseas or for domestic issues, is you go through the body politic model. You go through college, you get your master's degree, you get your PhD, you become a lecturer on these things, you become an authority, and then you go there and you add your thought to the current terrain. So these were all very much funded congruently by individuals in the United States like Rockefeller and Carnegie, who created the British Committee for the Theory of International Politics that gave birth to what we even call international relations today. They created one in the United States, they created one at the London School of Economics, and this really goes back to Alfred Zimmern, who is the source for Carroll Quigley's Tragedy and Hope. In 1947, Quigley gets together with Zimmern, and Zimmern tells him essentially, "I'm leaving the group because they want to build up Germany against France," and he was against this measure. But you then find out that he goes on to be the second head of UNESCO. Lord Brand says that he never resigned, and he's the one who gets credited in all of these international affairs journals and textbooks in college as basically inventing international relations. So it goes from a situation where the United States is isolationist before the late 1800s, and then all of a sudden, starts picking up on these ideas of international affairs because, Great Britain and the British Empire has been around for a long time. So they've developed different strategies of how to act in certain situations, something that Buckminster Fuller called the Great Pirates. You go find the strongest brute on the land that you're conquering, and you give him all the riches and the gold, and you say, "Hey, go pick your own crew, go get the guy you want to help you run it, and we'll be back in a few years. Just don't tell that guy that we're doing it." And this gets repeated over and over and over again. I believe it was in Alfred Zimmern's The Third British Empire. He talks about how in the United States, around the time of the American Revolution, there were mistakes made that didn't take into account the grievances that people would have. And if King George and these other culpable individuals, by their account, had just changed one or two things, then they would have incorporated the United States like they did in the other federated model. And then they, just 10 years later up in Canada, when there's a lot of French Canadians and different ethnicities clashing, they draw on the American Revolution on how they made poor mistakes in order to try to correct the problem. So it's technology constantly trying to correct itself, not for our benefit, but for the benefit of organizations, groups, individuals that have our international relations under their control. So I hope that answers your question. I think it really just comes down to the myth that we have a representative government, because if you have if you're represented by a bunch of people that are just reading the same construct and the same paradigm, and then going to Congress and figuring out ways that they can perpetuate that and profit off of it in the meantime, then we have something very, very far from any representative government. Whether or not, with the expansion of population and other factors, we can actually be represented by so few people, in that system is something we need to discuss as well. But it's really what Jacques Ellul talks about in the Technological Society is that the technology constantly increases, and eventually, you get into a situation where, let's say, the hospitals in Cincinnati, pick a city out of the blue here, are short on organs. and there's also a high accident rate in Cincinnati, and people run stoplights all the time. Now, does it make sense to try to fix the stoplights to such a way, or give better notice to the drivers, or to try to stop these accidents? Or has it become a dependency for the organs at the hospital for other people to get these organs? And it takes us out of the equation. It's a constant rescinding of humanity to a point of entropy where value judgments are no longer necessary, and everything becomes standardized, along a continuum that we have no control over. And that's how it's been, since the get-go. None of the people that founded this country could have foresaw this, and a lot of their own inconsistencies at the time caused this problem.
That is very well said, dude. That is very well said. All right, so I'm going to wrap up the conversation on Iran. I'm going to cover this Congo article really quick so we can get to Chile. I think we're short on time because Keith has to leave at noon. But so let me just say, there's an article on page 14. What really happened in the Congo, the CIA, and the murder of Lumumba, and the rise of Mobutu. There was a whole bunch that I had highlighted about this, again, earlier in the conversation while Ted was talking. My notes were Gottlieb and MK Ultra. So if you just do a search on Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, MK Ultra, and Patrice Lumumba, you're going to see how the CIA planned to poison him and tried to assassinate him in a variety of ways. And he ended up dead. And that was to prevent Soviet control over Congo, because they have important mineral rights to which these other people wanted to pillage and plunder and then sell to us in these smart devices. So anyway, that's the article on page 14. Now we're moving to page 26. What really happened in Chile, the CIA, the coup against Allende, and the rise of Pinochet. Just to set the background, September 11th, 1973, there's a coup. Now we're going to get some details. I could read some from this article. I just wanted to mention Kissinger and war crimes and search it up, and you can find the documentation that he's connected to Chile and the overthrow of a democratically elected leader, Salvador Allende, and they put in military dictator of the junta, General Augusto Pinochet, who is friendly to the Western industrial interests, let's say. So I'm going to open this up for discussion, and it looks like maybe we have 15 or 20 minutes left. So who wants to throw down on Chile?
I will say this is in running with the article on Iran for bizarreness to begin. I think that's the revisionist going on in here is this is probably one of the most well-known coups that the CIA has ever been involved with, up there with Iran. And once again, to read this, it's actually, I think it's interesting too, because they say, well, we did try to do the first coup, that didn't work, but we had nothing to do with the second coup. That's my summary of what they're talking about here as an initial entry into this discussion.
Yeah, there's a lot of parallels between this and the article on Iran, because it started again with, like what I was saying a second ago, a nationalization crisis. Kissinger had a bunch of people around him, Richard Helms at the CIA, and Nixon. All of them were getting pushback from IT&T and PepsiCo, who had major interest economically down there. And so you have this democratically elected leader who the people are very happy with, and Nixon doesn't want him to get in the first place, so they developed this thing called Track One, and Track One is basically the propaganda arm where they want to do a lot of propaganda efforts to the politicians as well as to the people, and they fund a lot of these so-called grassroots but are really AstroTurf type actions where they give money to an old lady to go bang pots and pans, and that turns out better than they thought it was going to be. But the Track One and the propaganda and political is what Nixon set up originally around 1970 in order to make sure that Allende never got in there. He said this guy's a bastard by his. But Alexander Haig quotes him as saying he was an SOB and he's a bastard and we need to get him out of there. What I find most interesting in this is they're really trying to rearrange the deck chairs on the historical Titanic here, because it's just a constant moving of, it's like the cup and the ball. If I can hide the evidentiary piece that makes all of this bullshit and contradictory, then I can pull one over on somebody. Because immediately after reading this article, I went back to some of my own notes on this, and you find a memo written on October 16th, 1970, that basically makes this whole article moot. because in Henry Kissinger's own memoir, he states that there was this specific meeting the night before, and that's where they decided that they're no longer going to pursue Track 2. And Track 2 was to try to foment a military coup. They ordered the kidnapping of one individual, and he ends up getting killed. But on October 16th, 1970, there's a CIA memo. This is after Track 2 is allegedly over. It states it is the continuing policy that Allende be overthrown by a coup. It is imperative that these actions be implemented clandestinely and securely, so that the U.S. government and American hand will be well hidden. So they make this big public announcement that, we're no longer going to mess with what they're doing down there, and this is their democratic affairs, and we're going to end the Track 2 that really foments the coup and does a lot of these smaller actions. And we're going to try to hide the fact that we're doing that by continuing it after we just said we ended it. So there was a lot to take away from the article, but I recommend that anybody interested in debunking it in one article, one CIA classified memo, that would be the October 16th, 1970 CIA memo that blows this all out of any validity at all. Even the U.S. ambassador to Chile from 1967 to 1971, his name was Edward Corey. He reports to the CIA and Kissinger that any kind of a coup at this time is not going to be happening. So essentially, Nixon says, "Why don't you come back to Washington and we'll send somebody there that can get something done." The main players in this are really Nixon, Kissinger, and Richard Helms at the CIA. And I don't think there have been international, war crimes tribunals by independent organizations that have found Kissinger not worthy to travel to their country as a result of this one action. So, all throughout the article, there's a lot of doublespeak. I don't want to monopolize the analysis here, but they admit that they're funding this newspaper that's one of the most well-known newspapers down there called El Mercurio. And it's CIA funded with $2 million. And they say that, we gave them $2 million to basically Allende had taken away it made ink prices and the materials necessary to print so expensive that this El Mercurio that he saw as a foe and CIA, backed couldn't get the resources to do this. So the CIA gave him $2 million, but the author, Jack Devine, who was involved in this coup and is trying to, kind of rewrite his role in history here, states that they're CIA funded, but they didn't influence them at all. They had a media account with them, so.
It was strictly an altruistic move by the CIA. I read that as well. And the idea that anybody would give somebody $2 million and not have influence on it, I don't care if it's a newspaper or anything else, is ridiculous on its face. I also think it's significant that there's a September 11th date within the coup itself, right? I mean, whether or not that's just happenstance or not, it is another date in history that has, a major event in history that happened on September 11th. So, and then also I think it's interesting they say that, that it was a surprise to the United States. This might be hard for many Americans and people elsewhere to believe, since it's become conventional wisdom, especially on the left. The Washington played a crucial role in the military-led overthrow of the democratically elected Allende, which resulted in a 17-year of authoritarian rule of General Augusto Pinochet. You basically just sort of heard about it. It came over. It was announced over the radio, and oh my goodness, look what happened over there! Boy, I woke up this morning and they overthrow the government of Chile, and then I have my cornflakes. It's just I don't know. It's just bizarre. Again, I keep using that word, but because I don't want to swear a lot. It's another just, and again, it goes into even more detail. The CIA started to, met with the author of this article, the Jack Devine, met with a recruit who's a senior member of the Communist Party. So again, as was stated in Tragedy and Hope, the people have no qualms about working with either side, the far right or the far left, to meet
frequently
their
do.
And they frequently do. And it's right, it's there. And he actually says that, which I found surprising. He actually admitted to that. So again, it's my jaw just kept hitting the tables over this as well. I just think it's a really, what's the point of this one? Why do they need to revise the history on this one is my other question. Is this just a way of us cleansing ourselves? Is this written for the next generation? So the history book will say this and say, that's what it's all about, right? I mean,
they're racing the tracks. Go ahead, Kev.
Yeah.
Well, like Hillary Clinton said last night, we have to believe it. The people have to believe it. We have to tell the story. And essentially that nobody else around the world is going to believe this either until they're born into it. Just like the databases that we accept ever increasingly will accept whatever narrative gets thrown in front of us by those that have the most power to push that narrative to us. And this guy is really lamenting the negative look of covert action. He says that they have to reinforce the positive potential of covert action, and uses things. Uses the words such as these actions were the most justified. There's the justified sinning and the white man's burden that if we didn't do this, something was going to happen. And I also found significant. You mentioned the September 11th day, which I've always found to be very strange, and I can see why they want to disassociate themselves with that. But they talk about these different critics that are sent back to Washington. This is a note. A note sent back by the CIA officers to try to give intel back and forth. And the author says that he was getting calls in his CIA station down there where they would use this wording like, my aunt is sick and she may not live to recover, or my aunt has died. And the immediate thing that popped into my head was the big wedding, right? Before 9/11, they say that the terrorists, quote unquote, called it the big wedding. And I think with JFK, I think it was the big event, right? So there's the big event. Yeah, the big event, the big wedding. My aunt is, there's just interesting correlations between some of the ways that these events took place. I think especially if they're going to set up a parliament in the United Nations, which I think is one of the goals of the World Federalist, of which Hillary Clinton absolutely subscribes. They need somebody that's going to get up there and retell the story and put it in a positive light. And look what we did in Normandy, and look what we did for these people. Well, without discussing that, quote unquote, we did that for those people. And but then we set up the Marshall Plan and tried to re-engineer the whole economic system of Europe in our favor, quote unquote, And so I think that also, I'm putting that in air quotes for anybody who's just listening to this, because it's not our any more than it's, it really goes back to different levels of organic unity and getting people to accept that I belong to this certain group of events, and it's unfortunate that we did that because now we're reaping the repercussions of that. Well, instead of just saying I didn't have anything to do with that, I didn't score the touchdown, that my team didn't win, I don't know any of these people, they're not even from the city. You can convince people of a paradigm and get them to buy into it. Like that's why Dick Cheney's all over television right now. It's sickening. He's trying to reinforce his work. He's trying to avoid war crimes, essentially. Not that that'll ever happen in this country, because not enough people, are calling for such a thing.
Kev, your audio went out.
It wasn't me.
I apologize. Sorry about that. Yeah, that's what happens when you.
I think like I said, the phrase is the baby will be delivered tomorrow. I'm going to start using the phrase Uncle Jonas will be in town tomorrow, just on calls, just to flag it in the NSA database. But I think it's interesting too that, and I don't know, that Allende, killed himself, wasn't actually killed by any of the forces in the coup. Took his own life rather than become prisoner of the military. I don't know if there's any way to prove or disprove that. But I think it's also, again, they're saying it was Washington held Allende's demise a major victory. Nixon's national security advisor, Henry Kissinger, were pleased. So was the CIA. Against all odds, the Santiago station helped to create a climate for the coup without tainting the effort by becoming directly involved. Well, thank goodness they were able to do that, because that it's just, once again, they're washing their hands of everything.
They're like, we didn't pay for that.
No, we don't.
American taxpayers didn't pay for that.
No.
That's what they're saying.
I keep hearing that voice from the movie Gone with the Wind, where the lady says, "I don't know nothing about birth of no babies," but saying, "I don't know nothing about no coup for Allende or Iran or anything else." It's just this total. If in fact none of our tax dollars were actually used for any of this, then we should get our money back, because the CIA apparently bungled everything they ever touched as far as military coups go. So, they're abject failures if none of this stuff actually happened under their watch.
And the logic that never gets discussed is why, quote unquote, we are there in the first place. Are we just there watching all these things go happen around the world, or are there actual economic interest? And I think that's where the fact that they had this major deposits of copper ore that were valuable to IT&T, and Allende was going to nationalize for whatever reasons he was elected to do so, a lot of these industries. Same thing that they were doing in Iran. They don't want basically they had recognized Allende was not a fan of the United States, and he made various statements that the United States wasn't a democracy. He may have thought the Soviet Union was more of a democracy than the United States. He made all kinds of statements like that. But it's the idea that the CIA has all this interest, and they're just sending people to babysit, sit in CIA station houses, and not do anything about this. Where throughout the article he states, it goes from $200 to a lady to buy pots and pans to bang in the street to $2 million to the newspapers, to this, and then they say, but we didn't control it. We didn't have anything to do with it. We just put this money out there, and then they did something with it. That's Charlie Wilson's war, right? Yeah, Charlie Wilson's war. It's the same thing. Yeah. It's like, we created the Mujahideen. We sent him over there. We sent the Mujahideen over there, but we didn't know that if we told them that God, it was Zbigniew Brzezinski standing there next to the helicopter telling members of the Mujahideen that God told you this is your land, go get it. And then we're surprised when Islamic radicalism comes up and people want to do things in the name of God. Give me a break.
Yeah. I think one of the more, I don't know, it's not frightening, but it's definitely it's a cue. It talks about, and this goes almost to the end of the article, to know your limits, about the experience in Chile, lessons learned. It finally says the pros of the problem for the United States is it leaves behind an era defined by major military actions in Afghanistan and Iraq, and enters a new period in which covert operations will become more crucial in places such as Iran, Pakistan, Syria, and Ukraine.
Foreshadowing.
So, yeah, there it is. This is not that we should find it surprising, but it's right there, right? It's not it's the PNAC article. Look out, here it comes, kids. So I think that's a definite. And that means that probably in 50 years, if Foreign Affairs is still around, any of us are, we can read how they had nothing to do with anything that went on over there, even though they're telling us, they're going to do it. So I think it's frightening because, at this point in time, the Iran, Syria, Ukraine, you have this thing called Russia that's involved.
It's ongoing. They could have World War IV anytime over there. Hey, Keith, before you have to split for work, do you have any closing comments?
Yeah, I just sent you a quick message. I can hang around. I rearranged my schedule so I could hang on a little bit longer.
All right. So at least we have time to do, closing comments on all these articles and what we think it means. Because what they're trying to do is reframe the past to control the present and thus control the future. There's an Orwell quote out there. I don't recall the exact wording about it, but it has to do with controlling the past and controlling the future. And thus, that's what they're doing. That's what Orwell was describing in 1984. These people, the World Federalists under Hillary Clinton and Walter Cronkite and all the Rhodes scholars and the acolytes, Cecil Rhodes and the CFR, all these people, they want world federalism. That's their term for world government. You can look it up. It's a real group of people, World Federalists, world federalism. These are the terms you want to search. That actually gives the veracity to the term. It's a specific instead of the general New World Order type of phrase. The New World Order is freely used these days by the Council on Foreign Relations. It was the title of one of the articles, I believe, on page 22 or something like that we talked about at the beginning of this. Marianne Slaughter, who's a CFR member and published author, she wrote a book called The New World Order. It's published by Princeton University. You might want to check that out. So these things that people, they poo-poo it as conspiracy theory. No, these are actual historical documents that should be read by the American public while there still is an American public. And maybe if we can get ourselves back on balance, then we can discover the true value of an individual and autonomy and autodidactic, self-learning that makes a republic strong because we have an informed citizenry And I think there's also a Jefferson quote where he talked about if you wanted to, have a strong country, you need to generally educate the citizens on what's going on. And what's going on back at the time of the American Revolution was we were calling bullshit on the divine right of kings and the British Empire and their opium slavery monopoly trade that they had going on. And we wanted to be independent and self-reliant, self-sufficient in this country. And we didn't want to extend our foreign policy beyond our borders. Especially across transatlantic, so it foreshadows the 20th century where the whole British goal of British intelligence was to get America involved in World War I and World War II so that they could eventually transfer the load of the empire of which they were going bankrupt. And this is what Zimmern talks about in the Third British Empire book, which was a series of lectures in 1926 at Columbia University, which he delivered very accurately describing what would be going on over the next 60, 70, 80 years as far as the Anglo-American special relationship. He coined the phrase welfare state. He coined the phrase, what was the other one, Kev? Besides international relations theory, he also coined, the British Commonwealth. The British Commonwealth, which instead of having an empire, they said Commonwealth. That's friendlier to American minds and audiences. And so this is, really trying to knit together all these disparate facts that exist in reality such that you can formulate an understanding by removing the contradictions. And when you can do that, you call a couple friends and you try to share some of that through creating media. At least that's what I do. And Ted's starting to do, according to that. I saw his pilot, and so I've seen the first episode, which is right here, if I can find the tab. The Reality Bites series that he's creating. And he's got excellent audio, and he's very well spoken. He's even putting on some formal wear here for you. He's got a jacket.
Try to look like I'm smart.
Oh, well, you are smart. You're smart enough to try and make mistakes and learn from them and improve, because this is improved over the pilot. And so I look forward to sharing this with other folks here in the Tragedy and Hope community. And I also was just uploaded day 1, part 2 of the Alan Weisbecker visit, where I gave him a tour of the history blueprint. Very similar to what I've done during the conversation while you guys were talking. I was clicking through the history blueprint, aka my brain model, and sharing some of the attachments and some of the connectivity to give a little bit extra context to what we were talking about today. And so I also just wanted to bring up this book that I found in a search the other day while I was doing this project for Stefan Molyneux on the truth about the Rothschilds. And I found this book called Zionism and Technocracy, the Engineering of Jewish Settlement in Palestine. And I found this because I was looking for Rothschild involvement in the early colonization in Palestine in the 1800s, which completely shows intent that they had plans for that land well before Hitler or World War II or any of the other stories we're told in school. So what I'm saying is that the real history that's out there, that's totally there to be verified and legible and credible and relevant and substantial, it's all right there, but it's only right there if you stop believing the minimized story, the inaccurate, ambiguous, fuzzy story that they give us about our history, and actually look for these colorful, brilliant, fascinating, fantastic details that are right there at the other end of the search results. So I'm just saying, I'm trying to make myself familiar with all the relevant and substantial facts regarding our environment, and that seems to be one of them. So I'm going to turn it back over to you guys for closing comments, observations, anything else that you wanted to say before we wrap it up.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Anne-Marie Slaughter. She has the article mentioned in previous podcasts and recordings called The Real New World Order. And she is a CFR member, former director of the Office of Policy Planning in the State Department, which is what the Council on Foreign Relations sought out to do in the first place. They basically created, right around the time of the Marshall Plan, out of the Georgetown set and through the CFR and the Aspen Institute with Walter Pepke and his brother-in-law, they created this Office of Policy Planning at the State Department that, does what Hillary Clinton said. This is this is where we go to get our where we need to be thinking and what we need to be doing on international relations. And it's no longer internal relations any longer, because the isolationist chain has already been broken many years ago. And these NGOs and non-governmental authorities and other bodies such as Freemasonry or the Rotary Club or all these different interdependent bodies that get spread all over the world are creating a new type of polity. So then you get into things like the crisis of democracy democracy, which John Taylor Gatto talks about in the underground history, or the ultimate history lesson in the underground history of American education, where people are becoming more and more aware of this, but at the same time, power is getting concentrated in a smaller and smaller group of hands. So my parting message and cue for somebody to research further would be to look into the international relations theory called complex interdependence. And this was created by two authors together, one of them by the name of Joseph Nye, who is the head of the Harvard Kennedy School of Government and former head of the Rhodes Trust, as well as a Rhodes Scholar. And his co-writer is a guy by the name of Robert Cohen out of the University of Chicago. And he attained his bachelor's degree by just reading the great books of the Western world in this interdependent body of knowledge that is meant to upset the American polity by presenting a greater view on Western civilization, and therefore making obsolete the models that we currently have today. If you look into the complex interdependence article, as well as the different NGOs that the Council on Foreign Relations pimps for, that sponsors, you'll find that really the things we're talking about in these previous articles just released by the CFR are models that have become obsolete in some ways, because what they now use the NGOs and what's called the World Business Network to create networks of the corporate interest. So now they can go into a place like Libya and have a full spectrum dominance approach to how they're going to overthrow a government, set up new economic models, introduce technology, harvest the oil resources, and create an interdependence by you have Motorola and Verizon and all these companies signed on to it, as well as British Petroleum. And you go into, it's basically like how to start a country in a box after we destroy it. It's the Marshall Plan perfected. So while these covert options are always on the table, and they're going to try to minimize them by saying, "Oh, we ended that, and then it just happened." This is the future. I think the future is the complex interdependence, where the governmental models that have long since become obsolete are acknowledged to be so, but then handed over to a group that really orchestrates the technocratic rule all along. We're taken out of the equation. They say, "Oh, we're just trying to provide the best information. That's why we sponsor all these different congressional publications." And but that's not what I signed on for. That's for sure. I'm not giving my consent to have my interest represented by internationalists who are sending all the jobs overseas long time ago and doing all of this in a fashion that is meant to sow greater dependence. So, I mean, going back to as early as Freemasonry through these other non-governmental organizations, it's all about sowing interdependence outside the realm of government. And if we let that go too far, that's the reality that we will live in going forward.
I also got some good brain capture live while you were talking there, so the audience has a feel for these are not disparate, disconnected things that exist. These are things that exist that do have connections. The brain model leaves it to you to learn about all the individual parts, which is the grammar around each individual node, and to formulate your own connections and understandings, because I'm not trying to tell you what's going on. I'm simply trying to say these things exist. They do have interconnectivity, and the only way you're going to figure it out is to go through all the pages connected to any one of those nodes and to read about it. And you're going to find a fascinating little circumstance that goes on there. It's called learning, and your brain really hasn't been exposed to it too much in this world. It's been mostly here's memorization and declarative sentences, and you're going to take that as knowledge. And so once your brain starts engaging in this true path of discovery where you're going in your own direction, the history blueprint is non-finite. It's non-linear. It's any direction you want to go, any place you want to start, you can start learning. And everyone's learning experience is going to be unique, as opposed to what Common Core and the American Prussian education system churns out, which is interchangeable parts. We are not interchangeable parts, at least those of us on this call. We're hoping those of you listening also don't want to be interchangeable parts. And the only way to get away from being an interchangeable part is to make yourself a unique asset and indispensable in a variety of ways to people around you in your lives. And that's going to bring more happiness and more comfort and self-esteem and self-confidence and all these things that we want in life that we can't buy at Walmart or can't buy any place, no matter how much money we have. So the real value in life is through a process of self-discovery and self-learning. And that means understanding yourself and the environment, which we all share, And it's this objective knowledge that's relevant to all of us because it's right there in the middle between all of us. We can see it, we can touch it, we can document it, we can show you here it is. This is what we're talking about today. So this is the relevant, information that's pertaining to plans of our future, plans of America's future. I mean, people were out there making plans for their kids and thinking they're going to go to college and they got some money set aside. They don't plan for this country to be around. Read the DC 2020 or the Strategic Trends document that goes from 2007 to 2036, published by the United Kingdom's government on their Ministry of Defense website. And it gives you their plan. And they have several of these. They're always in motion and being improved. But we're 7 years into that document, and you can already start to see the things that they're calling for in the future being manifested. And like I said, there's a variety of these documents that describe the actual and factual reality that is being fabricated day by day through people believing things that are not true and not asking questions going through their day and understanding the nature of the institutions that surround them, the groups that they call themselves part of and participate in, and their relationship with their family and friends. So really, we're being blocked from getting the meaning out of life by them censoring this information, and in a very Orwellian, not to be cliche fashion, they are censoring out. They're taking the words, the things that lead to intellectual and independent individual freedom out of our culture. And I think that says, first off, that's not what America should be about. And secondly, that means we have an enemy who is actively trying to dismantle and disparage this country and ruin all the good hard work that all of our families participated in over how many generations we've been here, even if you're first generation and you've gone through a legitimate process to be a citizen. They're taking all that away. They're taking everything that we've all worked hard away. And I think people should be not only a little bit upset about that, but take that anger and constructively use it to means, and purposes and agendas and goals that resolve the situation. And if the root cause of all these situations is individuals believing things that are not true, and then a bunch of those individuals getting into groups and saying, hey, we're going to take away these other people's rights just because we have a majority, this is not what this country is about. It's about the rights of an individual that are inalienable because of our connection to reality. Nobody can eat for you. Nobody can defecate for you. Nobody can think for you. These are things that we can't outsource, and therefore we are responsible for ourselves. We own ourselves, and we have to survive in this world through cause and effect. They create these terrariums where they're like, you don't need to worry about where your food comes from or how water gets to that faucet. Just keep participating in the system, paying this imaginary money, being a little hamster in our wheel because we got lots of wheels and that's how they get their power. And, so once you recognize that, step out of it, step out of that, take back your power, vote with your dollars, start to embrace things that give you meaning and substance in your life and give you long-term benefit as well as short-term benefits, and stop consuming the junk food that they give you on TV that is like short-term. It's like, it's only entertaining for a half hour, and then that's going to do you no good the rest of your life. So they get us to, systematized in a systematized habitual fashion to throw away our most precious asset. Our only asset is time. Everything else is an illusion because property only matters as long as you're here, really. So they get us to focus on things that are not substantial and they're not relevant. And they get us to ignore the fact that they're making a plan and publishing it and giving it out to all their acolytes and followers and people who want to be a little toady of the New World Order or be a world federalist. So this is the dichotomy in which we all find ourselves as individuals. And I find it a fascinating process every day to get up and engage in the learning process. And occasionally when we have some time to say, yeah, let's have a meeting and just talk about this one issue of this one magazine published by this one group that has such a wide effect on so many people. And I appreciate you guys all being here this morning. So I'll leave it to any other closing comments, but I've spoken my piece.
This is Ted. I just want to say, anybody who's actually listening to this this podcast or share it with others. And one thing you'll find, as something you said there a little bit earlier, Richard. Somebody said, "Why are you reading?" This process of learning the way the world really works and educating yourself. And I'm going to use a word here. It's kind of fun. Because it's you've heard us laugh on this call. We're not a bunch of morbid people just bemoaning the fate of mankind. This is actually my idea of entertainment, fun, enjoyment. It is, you could turn off Mike and Molly from your TV set, for God's sakes, one of the worst shows going out there, or anything else, and you will find yourselves, in a more a environment where you're enjoying yourself on an entirely different level. And that's actually what I get out of things like these discussions, the content that's put out by Tragedy and Hope and others, and on my own research. This is really truly living. And if you haven't started doing that yet, or you have friends who haven't, find some way to get them a little bit excited about something, on a small level, and hopefully it'll bloom into what we're doing here now. So that's what I have to say. Thanks.
I guess I'll throw it out for a closing comment. To piggyback on what Ted was talking about, I think it's utterly important that we should always remain hopeful. I think we should be very, very positive. I can tell you from my own self that in the late 70s, when I started talking about the Federal Reserve, that people would look at me like deer in headlights. I'd get laughed at, et cetera, et cetera. Today, I can almost go up to anybody and mention the Federal Reserve, and so many people know, okay, I know it's not private, I know it's not good, et cetera, et cetera. So, again, when I look at it over a 40-year span that, I've dealt with a lot of this stuff, we've come a huge, huge way. Believe me when I say this, because, back years ago, you talk about any of this stuff, and, people just think you're crazy. Now people are really starting to listen to this. People understand, you talk about the CFR now, and it's not, it's not the tinfoil hat thing anymore. People go, yeah, I've heard of that organization. Tell me more about it. So on that part, I think, yeah, absolutely, we should stay very, very positive. I am very positive. I do remain very hopeful. It's going to be some rough rides for a while, but I do think we're going to get through this. I think better times are coming, and I continue to believe that, because I see people on a broader scale starting to understand that things aren't what we've always been told, and they're starting to dig, and the internet has caused a huge explosion. Let's face it, if it wasn't for the internet, none of us would probably even know who each other was. So, but with that, I'm going to leave with this point. We live in an allegory of a cave. We have a wall in front of us. And in the allegory, people were chained down and they were forced to look at the wall. But we're not chained down. The only thing that chains us down is ourselves, our own minds, and an unwillingness to think. I would encourage everyone, just turn around, look behind you, look to the side, look all around the room, ask questions, talk to people that you're with. Find out what their interest is. We all have common ground on something. Find that common ground. Talk to them. Build on it. Have discussions. Share information. These people are going to share information back. It's utterly important to realize that what we're being told, what's given to us, is not the reality in which we live. We make our own realities, and we make our own realities by doing it with others, with people that we live with our families, co-workers. And so it's really, really important that we talk to people. People understand something is wrong in this country, utterly wrong. And I think people right now are open to sharing these ideas, and it's important that we jump into the conversation as much as we can and help steer that. So that's all I got to say.
Yeah, great points. You guys have really brought a lot to the table today, and I really appreciate you organizing this call. One parting point that I'll make, kind of piggybacking on what you said there, and it's really a question. In that hopefulness that you're acknowledging, and I definitely agree with, because of the amount of knowledge that's spreading today, has the agenda of these organizations accelerated as a result of that? Are we witnessing an acceleration of a plan that maybe was set out for a more of a Fabian strategy, that because of our increasing awareness, that crisis of democracy, where, because of our increasing awareness, are they having to move forward on things faster than they maybe would have? Or do you think things are falling into place geopolitically, in a way that we might be able to take that power back?
Yeah, Kevin, I think there's some truth to that. Because of the events that are taking place, people even feel, if you talk to people, people feel that something is up. There's there's a shifting going on, even globally. I mean, you see some of the unrest that's going on globally. So, yeah, I think on a certain level, yeah, that it probably is being sped up for sure.
Yeah. Well, just my last point. This is a lighter note here. I don't know if you guys caught it, but I certainly did. Did you notice the ads in between the Chile article and in between the New World Order article? I mean, if there's ever a sign that we're on the right track here, I just wanted to share
the internship program, the CFR internship program.
I'm not sure I even have that one. I'm not sure I have that one. You have to bring that one up.
The Georgetown one?
Yes, the Georgetown one. The world's leading master's program at security studies at Georgetown University. This is what they're advertising in Foreign Affairs magazine. Well, at the bottom, you'll notice
it's in Qatar. Oh. This is their Middle Eastern aspect. This is Georgetown in the Middle East. So go ahead and read that.
Okay, I'm not sure that I have that same one. The one I'm looking at here is the world's leading master's program, but all of these are indicative. That one there sounds like it's making the same.
Here's what it is. It's called the Georgetown University School of Foreign Service in Qatar, QATAR, Center for International Regional Studies. Established in 2005, the Center for International and Regional Studies, CIRS, at the Georgetown University for Foreign Service in Qatar, is the premier research institute devoted to the academic study of regional and international issues through the dialogue and exchange of ideas, research and scholarship, and engagement with scholars, opinion makers, practitioners, and activists. To contribute to the existing body of knowledge on the issues of the Persian Gulf and the Middle East, CIRS engages in empirically based and original research initiatives. And then the Chile article shows up, and then where's the New World Order article?
Yeah, it's further interdependence. Now, I didn't even catch that one. That's a different one than the one I have here. The ones that I found. Yeah, well, yeah.
That'd be a fun class.
Well, the first one that I found here was the world's leading master's program in security studies at Georgetown University. And at the bottom, it's listed as Georgetown University School of Foreign Service, which is where Quigley was the head of the history, the Department of Foreign Services brought in by Edmund Walsh. So, number one, you can go to Georgetown and do the security studies, and you can learn grand strategy, intelligence, counterterrorism, emerging technologies in security, and cybersecurity. You can learn all of this from the former chair of the Rand Corporation. That's number one. Number two, they have an advertisement for continuations of Fareed Zakaria's Post-American World book, which we're talking about with complex interdependence, on how these NGOs have already spread a unity far greater than the United States ever did. And now they've got another book called Still Ours to Lead. So there's a guy saying, well, just wait a minute, we can still lead. Then the next one, they're recommending two books here. We have The Battle of Bretton Woods, John Maynard Keynes, Harry Dexter White, and the Making of a New World Order. But it's just conspiracy theory. There's no world order, no New World Order, not mentioned twice in the same set of magazines here. Then you have Two Nations Indivisible, Mexico, the United States, and the Road Ahead. Oh yeah, Road Ahead. They've been, the North American Union got pushed back quite a bit, but this is where that's moving. And then the last one is Organized Chaos, the Future of the Internet, reimagining the Internet. So order out of chaos. How can we change the Internet in our favor by 2020? So those are some things to explore further. But I find it hilarious that. And synchronistic that so many of these advertisements are in line with the things we're finding, and it's very much out in the open. That's kind of what I was jumping on your point there about hope and acceleration of some of these agendas.
They're not just hoping. They're advertising.
No, they're advertising, and it's become the norm. It's like you want to go learn grand strategy and security studies, go to Georgetown, where Carol Quigley had access to the Council on Foreign Relations archives, and over a long period of time published this, and then it gets repudiated by a lot of these people saying that he's just one guy who studied this, and there are other scholars that can make their case better, i.e. Quigley said too much. But no, I just thought that was interesting. On a lighter note, the four advertisements that I had to cut out of my printed sections discussions here are all related to the same exact topics that we're talking about, except trying to get you to buy those products that, makes you feel a part of it.
Well, and it's showing that, 40, 50, 60 years after a coup, what happened? Western education is already set up there, telling the new story, training new people in their image as part of the the Anglo-American special relationship. And again, it's America continuing. It's it's continuation of British agenda through the proxy of America. And when they wear out the batteries in America and they can't suck any more resources out, they're going to take the whole shindig and move over to China, where they already have a bunch of willing, Prussian-educated, same system we got, slaves who are working in a system that has a corrupt government, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that was also funded by the same people who financed our country, financed the Soviets, financed the Nazis. So you see common financing behind all these efforts, and then they tell you, well, those are the bad guys over there, because they know, because they just funded them and they just armed them and just gave them all this stuff and trained them, right? That's why they know. That's, so it's the Hegelian dialectic. They want to get to a place that we don't want to get to, so they create this scary thing over there, and that changes our attitudes, values, behaviors, and beliefs. It's also called brainwashing, and it changes America. That is what we've seen. It's incrementalism. It's Fabian socialism. It's the strategy of Fabius Maximus, which is waging of a war of attrition by indirect means, non-direct confrontation, and a long strategy to wear out your enemy. America's getting pretty worn out yet, and it hasn't even really recognized as a population of at least 10% of us that there's a plan, agenda, financing, motive, opportunity, and it's going on. And we've got the documents to the nth degree. So what do we have to do to make it common knowledge out there where everyone's just like, oh, yeah. And people abandon representing their love with diamonds because it's funding the syndicate that's doing this to us. And that's part of the monopoly where they get us to pay for our own slavery and to attach love to a worthless stone. So these are just things that I've discovered during my journey in the past 10 years of kind of asking questions instead of making assumptions as my daily routine. And I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I really appreciated Keith hanging out and being late for work. I think you'll find it's well worth it when you watch it back. Ted, for always taking some time off work for a good conversation. And Kevin, for always providing the nth degree of detail. And if you want to learn more, just ask him, because I know a lot of this broad spectrum, but Kevin is really specifically oriented toward defining the details of organic unity and the encyclios paideia and the artificial scarcity of information that they're using to control human population in whatever country you want to see around the world. So it's the same mathematical model of manipulating people that's being used. So, I think that's going to be it for this morning's Tragedy and Hope Casual Cafe, available for the advanced access subscribers. And maybe at some point we'll put this out because I think this is publicly useful. I think some gents and ladies in the audience might find some of the information in here interesting and useful, and maybe they'll seek out the history blueprint and start taking their learning to the next level.
Hey, thanks for including me in this conversation. I appreciate it very much, and it's I'd like to do it again sometime, maybe quarterly. Every time it comes out.
Well, yeah, we could do this.
Likewise.
We could do it quarterly, because I could see that fitting into my schedule.
Yeah, and you're quite a busy guy.
And I could probably do more prep next time. I've just been so busy trying to get the footage that we've shot over the past couple of weeks out and finish the small note project. And we've got guests staying here last night. So my morning was a little more hectic than I had planned. I'd planned on having at least 20 minutes to read over some of those articles, but I think I did a good job considering I didn't do my homework.
Yeah. I never would have known.
I want to say I enjoyed it as well, and really thanks for the invite. Ted, thanks for the article. I was glad you posted that. It not surprising, very enlightening, and it was fun researching some of the. I learned a lot of stuff as I was doing some more research on it, so it really it was well worth the time. And Kevin, I know your wall isn't a cordwood wall, but I still like it anyway.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys. I had a good time doing this, and I think it does provide a lot of value for people, as well as just being able to discuss a lot of the things that we internalize by reading it. Just being able to get together and have a conversation and look at different bullet points from a different perspective historically. And you guys bring so much. I didn't know. We probably should be starting a tech company on this call based on the backgrounds that I heard from you two guys. But no, I really appreciate it. I think that there's a lot of value in it. And I'm looking at the Alan Weisbecker footage here, and I'm wondering if you bought a new camera, Rich. That looks amazing.
I didn't buy a new camera, but what you're seeing is it's the same lenses I was using downstairs, but there's not a whole lot of depth downstairs, so you can't really see things out of focus. And so I just I'd taken all the equipment to PorcFest and only got 1 or 2 opportunities to use it there. So when I came back, Weisbecker was here the next morning. I had all the stuff in the living room. I just threw it together here in the office. And even though cinematically I'm breaking some rules about where to put cameras and stuff like that, like I crossed some lines that you're not, but I watched it back and I was like, I don't think anyone's going to notice unless they read that cinematography book. So, you know, the lens, the lens of my camera right here is I think it's a 50 millimeter, and the T4i is a crop sensor, so it makes it probably a 70 millimeter lens, and that's why you get the depth of field. You get stuff behind me out of focus because it's a planar lens. It's a prime lens. It doesn't zoom, so it's specifically to create the isolation of the subject against the background. Because I got a noisy background. You don't want to see all my messy office here.
Yeah, well, it looks great.
All right, guys, I got to run. I got to head off to work. But hey, it was a pleasure talking with all you guys, and hope maybe sometime we do it again.
Yeah, thanks, Keith.
Thanks, Keith.
Okay, thank you very much.
Talk to you soon.
Okay, cool. Have a good day.
Peace.
All right.
And then there were 3.
All right. As I said, I appreciate it a lot. It was a lot of fun. Like I said, maybe this is fun to me. I mean, I probably need help, but that's okay. We all do. So
no, it is fun. I totally empathize with your point on that. I mean, it's not fun to realize how far we have to go sometimes, but I mean, learning is enjoyable to me too, and the subject matter doesn't always change that. Sometimes it does, depending on what it is, but. I think it's a good exercise, and I need it. So,
and it was made possible because Ted made his electronic copy of Foreign Affairs available on a little Dropbox gizmo, and that's how this call started. And I guess that's a fitting place to close it out.
Hey, have a great day.
Yeah.
All right, you guys enjoy too. Peace.
Okay. Bye.
Yeah. Take care, guys. Appreciate it.
Later, Kev.
Later.